Hello and welcome again to Not Fake News. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and smash that like button. You're going to love the Tucker Carlson we have. Let's do this.
Welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Another day, another installment in the Russian election soap opera. This one, an unexpected plot twist. Earlier today, Donald Trump Jr. released an email exchange he had last summer with an English publicist named Ron Goldstone. Now, Goldstone had offered Trump a meeting with a Russian lawyer called Natalia Veselnitskaya. Pronounced that twice. He claimed she had incriminating information about Hillary Clinton's dealings with Russia. Now, Donald Trump took the bait and met with Veselnitskaya some weeks later, though he complained later that she had nothing interesting to say during the meeting and instead just talked about Russian adoption law. Goldstone, meanwhile, emailed Trump Jr. to claim, without offering any evidence to support it, that the Russian government supported his father, Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Now, Don Trump released all those emails a little before noon today, and within minutes, the Congressional Treason Caucus swung into action to accuse Donald Trump Jr. of betraying his country.
We're now beyond obstruction of justice in terms of what's being investigated. This is moving into perjury, false statements, and even into potentially treason.
So, according to a sitting member of Congress, gossiping with foreigners now qualifies as treason in America, even if no meaningful information is exchanged. You ought to consider that before you allow an exchange student to live in your house. It could be a bigger risk than you think. Later tonight, Donald Trump Jr. will be going on Sean Hannity's show to explain his side of things.
Honestly, my takeaway when all of this was going on is that someone has information on our opponent. You know, things are going a million miles an hour. You know what it's like to be on a campaign. We just won Indiana, but we're talking about a contested convention. Things are going a million miles an hour again. And, hey, wait a minute. I've heard about all these things, but maybe this is something. I should hear him out.
Did you tell your father anything about this?
It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell him. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
Now, that full interview airs just ahead at 10, and you can decide for yourself what you think. But before then, consider what we know now, what Donald Trump Jr. did. A publicist emailed him to say his client had damaging information about a political opponent. Trump met with the client. Apparently, he learned nothing during that meeting. For that, he's an enemy of the state guilty of a capital crime. Now, if that is true, we've reached a new level of hysteria that could be dangerous to an awful lot of people, and not just the Trump family. How many lobbyists in Washington routinely meet with foreign agents who are seeking to influence American policy? Well, most of them, probably. It's going on right now as we speak in dozens of restaurants in D.C., literally all over the city, because that's standard here and has been for a long time. And yet, by these new standards, all of those people are now facing the possibility of lethal injection. They ought to be worried about that. But here's the most interesting thing about today's story. What was the damaging information this publicist offered Don Trump Jr. about Hillary Clinton? Well, according to the email we saw today, it was, we're quoting, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia. In an interview today, the Russian lawyer in question says the only question she got from Donald Trump Jr. during that meeting was whether the DNC had received illegal funding from Russia. So in other words, the Trump people believed the Hillary people were colluding with Russia. Meanwhile, of course, the Hillary people thought that the Trump people were doing the same thing. So each side believed the other was in bed with Vladimir Putin. It's like a comedy sketch. It would be funny, actually, if Democrats weren't suddenly talking about death penalty offenses. Britt Hume has been in Washington a long time. That's why he's Fox's senior political analyst, and he joins us now for some perspective. Is this a death penalty offense, do you think?
No, I think not. But I do think it does certainly suggest a willingness on the part of some of those associated with Trump, particularly his younger son, to collude with Russia if someone from Russia had information from the Russian government, as the email suggested, that would be damaging to Hillary Clinton.
Is receiving information the same as colluding?
Well, it could be so construed, but the point is that the problem with the whole scenario about collusion being suggested by this is that apparently no information was exchanged, no information was obtained. So if you even were to take the negative interpretation to say this showed a willingness to collude, the collusion didn't occur, at least so far as we know. Now, if it later turns out down the road that out of this meeting, unbeknownst to or at least things turn out that we haven't heard about that suggest that something did come of it and that information was provided and it was provided courtesy of the Kremlin, that would be a different matter entirely. But so far, we don't have that. What we have so far is a meeting that apparently went nowhere. It suggests a certain level of naivete, at least on the part of young Mr. Trump, who should have known if he gets an approach that appears to be from the Putin government, that he probably ought to be careful about taking the meeting. And wouldn't you love, Tucker, to hear what Paul, the campaign manager, has to say? Paul Manafort has to say about this. He was in the meeting. The Russian lawyer described him. Jared Kushner was there, too. Apparently, he got up after 7 minutes and left, right? And Manafort is described as having sat there on his telephone the whole time and paying no attention. But nonetheless, he's been around a long time. He's been on a lot of campaigns. He would know that what might be an approach from a foreign government was something you have to be careful with, which apparently young Mr. Trump didn't realize.
What's so interesting to me, though, and as a lifelong resident of Washington, maybe you can vouch for this perception, there's a lot of foreign influence on U.S. government policy going on in Washington all the time. Everyone I know is taking money from a foreign government, it seems like. And Russia's not on the top 10 list of governments that influence our policy.
No, I think, that's not quite the issue. Obviously, the ambassadors from nations all over the world are here, as we are in their countries, for the purposes of protecting our interests and thereby affecting the policies of those governments. The Russian ambassador has been a man about town in Washington for as long as I can remember, whoever he might have been. And Sergei Kislyak, who is the one with whom some of the Trump people had some meetings, was certainly in that vein. I saw him, you may have heard me say to you, last time I was in the Senate dining room, he was having lunch in there with Dianne Feinstein, and they were discussing who knows what. I never thought twice about it, and nor would anyone else. So contacts are one thing, and they're not by themselves illegitimate. But when someone acting during a presidential campaign on behalf of a foreign government, seeking apparently to help one candidate against another and to influence the campaign in that direction, that is something we have to be concerned about. The thing is, it doesn't appear to have come to anything.
What's so striking, though, is the Trump campaign clearly believed, and the Russian lawyer and her publicist, Goldstone, in England, were hoping the Trump campaign would believe that the Hillary campaign was colluding with Russia. It does seem like both sides thought the same thing of the other.
Yeah, that's one of the amusing ironies of this whole thing, that each side thought the other was guilty of playing patty cake with Russian interests.
Is there an investigation into whether or not the Hillary people were indeed colluding with the Russian government?
Well, who knows?
Good
because
point.
What such investigations as are going on inside the Justice Department, headed by Mr. Mueller, are going on.
Yes, there was. I just did a story, my last story, talking about Podesta email, WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks dropped a bomb saying why are the Democrats making such a big deal about Don Jr.'s meeting of a possible collusion when you have definite collusion where you have the Chinese ambassador speaking, contacting Podesta saying, we want an informal, off-the-record meeting on issues. Come on. That's collusion. Talking to Podesta. Anyway, I guess these guys don't know that story yet, and they'll probably hear about it tomorrow, which is something that you guys should know. We usually, not, and when I say we, I mean not fake news and other alternative media, we most of the time get the news a good day before even Fox News gets it. So that's value, and that's what we do. That's what we do.
Whatever direction he chooses to take them. We have no evidence so far that any alleged Hillary Clinton campaign collusion with the Russians is a piece of it, but who knows?
Just the WikiLeaks email bombshell I just dropped. WikiLeaks hasn't been wrong in 11 years. So I don't think my man knows about this.
So fun, since we're on this topic, in this vein, and we're all on the
Oh, wait a
lookout
second.
for...
Oh, wait. This is from last night. This is from last night. We didn't even know about this until today. So tonight you'll hear about what I spoke about, WikiLeaks, or you can watch my video, which is right there. So subscribe, go to the channel, look for the first video, which is the WikiLeaks bombshell.
Agent provocateurs from foreign countries, is to kind of get forensic about what American policies are influenced by foreign governments, what kind of money changes hands in Washington, how many people are lobbying on behalf of foreign interests, registered or not, legally or not. There's a lot of that.
Well, there is. And I'm one of those people in this town who have come to take a somewhat contrarian view about lobbying. Lobbyists are universally denounced by everybody.
Yes.
Lobbying is a constitutionally protected practice. It is seeking redress of grievances. Right?
Yes.
Petition for the government for redress of grievances. And if we didn't have a government that reached into every corner of American life and every nook and cranny of people's lives, we wouldn't have the squads of lobbyists that we have in this town. In a lot of cases, what lobbyists are here for is self-defense. In a lot of cases, what lobbyists are here for is to protect government subsidies that may be coming or other benefits that may be flowing to the entities that they represent. But it is a perfectly natural, constitutionally protected practice, and very often, when Congress is in one of its fits, it is the lobbyists who know the territory and know how things are going to play out who save the day by warning them, if you go there, this is what's going to happen. So let's hear it for the lobbyists, and to some extent, let's hear it for ambassadors.
That is a contrary view. Brilliant, thank you.
You can bet, Tucker.
Well, sabotaging U.S. elections and eating children aren't Russia's only foreign policy goals. They're also firmly committed to fighting ISIS, which they're doing. And now it appears possible that Russian forces may have killed the head of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The Syrian human rights group announced today it has, quote, confirmed information pointing toward the death of Baghdadi. Whether or not it's true, it's interesting. It could be a big victory in the war on terror. So why aren't more in the U.S. more excited about it? And should we be willing to work with Russia against Islamic extremism? Ralph Peters is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, and he joins us tonight. Colonel, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hey, glad to speak with you, Tucker. And for the record,
yes,
maybe your friends take money from foreign governments. I don't, and my friends don't.
I hope they don't. It's appalling how much of that happens. And it's appalling how much of our policy is influenced by foreign governments, and you may see that at work now. The Saudis are dead set, of course, against Iran, and they have every reason to be. But I'm hearing a lot of people in Washington, and other Gulf states all feel the same way, a lot of people in Washington say all of a sudden, well, maybe, defeating ISIS isn't such a victory. We've all been focused on defeating the Sunni terror threat embodied by ISIS, and now as we're moving toward achieving that, all of a sudden Iran is the real problem. Why shouldn't we take a moment to celebrate the potential death of Baghdadi?
Well, indeed we should. But I would not jump to the conclusion that the Russians killed him. They actually walked back their claim that they killed him. And if you look at the timelines, the odds are pretty good that if he's dead, and let's hope he is dead, he was killed by a coalition-backed aircraft. Because the Russians have not been seriously fighting ISIS. The Russians in Syria have been bombing hospitals, clinics, refugee columns, schools, and oh, by the way, they've been bombing the people we've been supporting, the anti-Assad opposition. Whereas they've been letting us take care of ISIS, and we've done a good job.
Well, Russians are certainly brutal, and so I have no trouble believing anything that you just said.
But you want an alliance with them?
I don't know why we wouldn't, it's confusing to me why, when you have a power like Russia, which obviously has interests that diverge from ours, but has some that align here, they've lost a lot of people to Sunni terrorism. Why wouldn't we cheer them on in their effort to stamp it out?
Well, certainly we would, but we can't have an anti-terror alliance with terrorists, which is what the Russians are. They're not Islamist terrorists, and they hate the United States of America. Again, bombing hospitals, clinics, schools. But how about, murdering dissidents and journalists at home and abroad?
Yeah, okay.
We have nothing in common with the Russians. Why don't
More or less than we do with the Saudis, our allies.
Well, the Saudis, I have no brook for the Saudis whatsoever.
Really, because they're our main allies in this.
They're not my main ally. And, I was warning about the Saudis decades ago, and you can read what I wrote about them. And the problem with Iran is that Iran is now, we've alienated just about everybody. We've blown it right and left in the Middle East. And now you've got Iran building an empire that'll stretch from Western Afghanistan to the Mediterranean. We've been doing a great job fighting ISIS. We've got the Iraqis, the Kurds, especially moving in the right direction. But when ISIS is defeated, and it will be defeated and crushed, the caliphate essentially is no more. When it is, we will not be welcome, but the Iranians will be. Because we have never had a strategy, we don't have a strategy, and we won't because we play jailbird checkers, and the Iranians and the Russians play chess.
But I'm a little bit confused on a couple fronts. One, we've had over 3,000 Americans killed in this country by about a dozen acts of terror in the last 16 years. None of them committed by Shiites. None of them. Yeah, all of them by Sunni extremists. So we actually don't face any domestic threat from Iran. We do face a massive threat from Sunni terrorists supported by Saudi Arabia and all these countries we say are our friends. A. B, if we're so afraid of Iran, then why did we kill Saddam Hussein, thereby empowering Iran?
Because we were stupid. And Iraq.
But why are the same people who supported that stupid act, the one you described as stupid, now agitating for a war with Iran? I'm confused.
Well, I certainly personally don't know anyone who's agitating for a war with Iran.
I do. I know a lot of people.
Okay, well, you know different people than I do. I know people that think that we have to eventually stand up to the Iranians, thanks to President Obama's outright cowardice and the shameful treatment of our sailors, for which John Kerry. Very complex world, and we refused to think clearly about it and honestly about it, just as you pointed out. No Americans have been killed in the United States by Shia terrorists, Sunni terrorists, and yet our president just went to Saudi Arabia and praised the Saudis to the skies. Our president seems determined to do any deal we can with the Russians, and the Russians hate, Vladimir Putin hates us. He is malevolent, and he is as close to pure evil as I can find. He's also brilliant. And so I don't understand why any American
Was that a praise?
would want an alliance with Russia. We should be strengthening our alliances with democracies. Instead of trashing NATO, we should be building up much more strongly. Why attack Australia? Why attack Canada? For God's sake,
I think you make a fair point. It's just hard to see why, and I'm not vouching for Putin's character, which
he's a killer.
hard to see why he's a threat to us. And how many wars can we fight at once? How many people can we be in opposition to at once? Why not just accept that people who are bad people share our interests and side with them?
He sounded like Charles Lindbergh in 1938 saying, Hitler hasn't attacked us.
I beg your pardon? Slow down. Hey, slow down, Colonel. I'm not in any way. You cannot compare me to someone who would make apologies for Hitler. And I don't think Putin is comparable to Hitler.
I think Putin is. Look,
I think it's a grotesque overstatement.
Putin is, well, I think
it's insane.
Putin, fine. You can think it's insane all you want.
You just compared me to a Nazi apologist because I asked a simple question, which is, slow down, why does he contravene American interests in a common cause with a group that's trying to kill ISIS?
Invaded his neighbors, broken the long peace in Europe. He assassinates dissidents and journalists. He bombs women and children on purpose in Syria. He is as bad as Hitler. And I'm sorry, if you don't like the Charles Lindbergh thing, I will retract that. But let's just say you sound like someone in the 1938 saying, what's Hitler done to us?
I would hate to go back and read your columns assuring America that taking out Saddam Hussein will make the region calmer, more peaceful, and America safer, when in fact it has done exactly the opposite, and it has empowered Russia and Iran, the two countries you say you fear most. Let's just be totally honest here. We don't always know the outcomes.
Right.
They're not entirely predictable. And so maybe we should lower the moral tone a little bit.
Okay, well,
rather than calling people accommodationists and say, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen. We can only make good decisions day by day.
You made your career being an American conservative patriot. And now you're suddenly cheering for Vladimir Putin?
I'm not in any sense cheering for Vladimir Putin.
Well,
it's not accommodating. It's not, I'm cheering for America as always. Our interests ought to come first, and to the extent that making temporary alliances with other countries serve our interests, I'm in favor of that. Making sweeping moral claims, grotesque ones, comparing people to Hitler, advances the ball not 1 inch. Actually, it blinds us to reality.
He hates America. He wants to hurt us. And I'm sorry, all this, suddenly Vladimir is a good guy. Russia's okay. No, it's not. Russia is evil.
What's your moral test? So we cannot in any way do business or make common cause with a country whose leader is, quote, evil, who is, quote, a bad person. That takes most of the world off the table. Most countries are run by really bad people. That's not the question.
You're not talking about dealing with them. You're talking about an alliance, an anti-terror alliance. Come on, that's
talking about first step, cheering on any attacks made by Russia against our moral enemy, our real enemy, ISIS. Why not just say that's great? I don't like Putin. I'm not living in Russia. I'm not taking money from the guy, but like a good deed is a good deed no matter who commits it. Why don't you say that?
Putin isn't killing ISIS primarily. He's attacking the anti-Assad people by letting us fight ISIS.
And are you convinced? Do you speak Arabic, by the way?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Okay, so
how do you Russian?
It's non-existent. Okay. And I would never claim to be a Russia expert. But I'm not sitting here talking about groups about whom I know very little, and I bet you're in that category, in Syria, and saying they're freedom fighters, they're serving the interest of freedom or democracy or American interests, when in fact, a lot of these groups, we know very little about them. And some of them are truly bad people who don't have our interest at heart.
And we're not backing the truly bad people. And how about
Assad? Well, how do we know that?
Is Assad a good guy? Do you think?
I don't know. I mean, ask the Christians and Jews who lived in Syria.
If we align,
we protected.
If we align with Russia, we are aligning with Iran. We are aligning with Assad.
And that's bad for American interests because why?
Do you think Iran is good for American interests?
I think Iran's a bad country and in a lot of ways against American interests. But within the context of Syria, Assad was much better for America than the people I believe you hope to replace him.
The Kurds? Kurds.
So the Kurds are going to run Syria?
No.
Now we're in fantasy.
No, they're going to have an independent state.
You're going to break up Syria into lots of little countries.
Well, I'm not going to break it up. It's
Okay,
going
but
to break
that's
up.
the point. Does it work so well in Iraq?
Yeah, well, it hasn't broken up yet, and the problem with Iraq was in 2003 when we had the chance, we didn't break it up.
We didn't break it up. Last question. Would you, knowing what you know now, and I hate to revisit this, but since you brought it up, knowing what you know now, that the deposing Saddam, his subsequent death, empowered Iran dramatically, and in fact, we explicitly helped Iran gain traction in Iraq, do you think that was a wise idea? And do you think there are any lessons going forward in Syria that maybe when you take out a secular leader, the vacuum is filled by even worse people?
Well, I think that is a valid point you can make. This often happens. But in 2003, we did a great thing inexcusably badly. Rumsfeld killing the MP brigades. There are a lot of reasons for it. We believed any Iraqi emigre who spoke English with an Oxford accent or a well-tailored suit. Again, our intentions were great, but if I had it to do over again, no, I would not get rid of Saddam Hussein because we hadn't thought it through. My mistake.
But you're confident that we've thought through what comes after Assad, who's run the country for decades, pretty peacefully, actually?
I think killing 500,000 of your own people probably doesn't mean you should remain in charge. Now,
after the civil war, I'm not making apologies for Bashar al-Assad. I'm merely saying that happened after.
It sounds like you're sitting here and making apologies for him.
So because I'm asking rational questions about what's best for America, I'm a friend to strongmen and dictators. That is a conversation stopper, not a beginning of a rational conversation. My only point is that when Syria was run by Assad, 10% of the population was Christian, and they lived in relative peace, considering they lived in the middle of the Levant.
That is absolutely true, and it's also true.
And so what's happened to those people now?
His father killed 30,000 or more people. Well, what's happened? Now, let's be fair. Barack Obama certainly blew it right, left, and center through sheer trepidation, cowardice, the inability to ever make a decision. But we are where we are, with 500,000 or perhaps more by now, Syrians dead. Primarily killed by the Assad regime, the Iranians, Hezbollah, and now the Russians. And yet you want us to align with the Russians, with Iran, with Assad.
I want us to act in America's interest and stop making shallow, sweeping moral claims about countries we don't fully understand and then hope everything will be fine in the end, because I just saw that happen and it didn't work.
You're doing that with
Russia.
I
am not doing it now.
With Russia.
I'm merely saying that if a country we don't like takes active steps to kill people who are a threat to us, I'm going to pause and applaud. I'm not going to stand back and compare their leader to Hitler because it makes me feel virtuous. That's what I'm saying.
But the fault in your logic is that Assad, the Iranians, the Russians are killing the anti-Assad forces.
I'm sure. But you haven't explained why I, as an American, should be terrified by Iran or Assad. And I think American leaders should act in the interest of their own country primarily. That's the number one job they have, and they're not doing it.
You couldn't answer me on Putin, so you changed the subject to Assad. I want to know why you think Vladimir Putin's okay.
I don't think he's okay. I think it's great that he's fighting ISIS. ISIS is a threat to us, and we're being told. I'm sorry.
You want an anti-terror alliance with Russia. What does Russia tangibly bring to the table?
Bombs that kill ISIS. That's my view. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We have gone long. Colonel Peters, thank you for joining us. It was a spirited conversation. President Trump in office 6 months. The Russia story not going way. Up next, we'll talk to Scott Adams, the cartoonist, who says the obsession with the story is actually helping Trump. Democrats keep hammering Donald Trump on Russia in the 2016 election, and their entire cable channels devoted to detailing every twist and turn of that story. But cartoonist Scott Adams says this is simply playing into the president's hands. It's good for him in the end. Scott Adams is the creator, of course, of the comic strip Dilbert, author of the book Win Bigly, which is coming out in October. He spent the last 2 years writing extensively and presciently about the persuasive style of Donald Trump, explaining why he seems to keep winning despite repeated setbacks. Scott Adams joins us tonight. Scott, thanks a lot for coming on. You are the king of counterintuition. Why is the Russian stuff good for Trump, do you think?
Well, look at the story arc so far. If you're on the left, especially if you were a Bernie supporter, you started out with, yay, Bernie's going to fix everything. Well, that didn't work out, but at least we have Hillary. And then that didn't work out, but at least we have this accusation that we accidentally somehow elected Hitler without noticing it, and we'll march in the streets and that will get rid of him. But that sort of didn't work out because the president stopped doing anything that wasn't presidential. He just sort of did what presidents do. And so they had this Russian thing. and they were throwing everything at it, trying to get the, if there's enough smoke, there must be some fire there going, but it just seemed like it was mostly smoke. But until recently, it was sort of working a little bit, and then Tillerson did this incredible reframing, where he said after the G20, he said, we're going to focus on the future and moving forward. And what that did was it redefined the left, their opponents, as the zombie lawyers were focusing on the past while the administration is working on fixing North Korea and ISIS and healthcare and all these important things, while the zombie lawyers are looking for maybe a family member had an error on some paperwork. So that's what they're reduced to is, I don't think you filled out that form right.
What's a zombie lawyer?
Well, if you have enough lawyers and you can't stop them, there's just, there are more being hired and there are more coming at you. It doesn't feel like they have a living purpose. It just feels like there's some force you can't stop, but they're not doing anything useful.
I'm laughing because, like most of our viewers, I think I have lived that scenario repeatedly. So, the news today that Donald Trump Jr. had a meeting with a lawyer from Russia whose connections to the Kremlin are unclear, may not exist, I don't know, and they talked, or he thought they were going to talk about dirt on Hillary Clinton. It dominated the news today completely. Give us some perspective on that. Is that a big story or no?
So let me give you some context that ordinary people don't know, that celebrities, people who do what you and I do, know, and Donald Trump Jr. knows. One is that we meet a lot of people, and if you ask me to fill out, how many people do you know who were born in England in the last 20 years that you talked to? The last 2 years, I wouldn't be able to do that, right? But the other thing is that the key to this story is a British publicist, I understand.
Yes.
Now, if ever there was anybody you could invent for a movie who was supposed to be the least credible person you could ever concoct
that is true.
in your life, it would be, how about a British publicist? How about that? Now, if a regular person hears from a publicist, hey, we got this thing going, they probably think, well, there's something to it. If you're Don Jr. and you live in this world, and a British publicist says, I got somebody to talk to, the only thing you really think of is, well, I'll find out what they have to say, because everything that this guy said, not so credible, right? So I can't imagine that he was going into the meeting thinking that what the publicist told him was actually accurate, because it would be the first time a publicist ever said something accurate, because it's not their job. Their job is to exaggerate. So, that's a little context that the viewers maybe don't have that you and I
haven't spent time around British. Some of my favorite people are British publicists, by the way, but accuracy maybe not one of the strong suits. Scott, that's fantastic. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
Up next, California may soon become the country's first sanctuary state. Where federal immigration law doesn't apply and is openly resisted, civil warning one. Up next, we'll talk to a California sheriff who says this move is a disastrous policy. It's not rooted in good intentions, but merely as a middle finger to the administration. That conversation next. I want to bring an update tonight from the Democratic People's Republic of the Bay Area. A few months ago, we told you about a terrifying robbery on a BART commuter train. It's like the subway in the Bay Area, in which a mob of 40 or more people swooped into a car, terrorized and robbed the passengers, and then took off and were never found. After the attack, BART refused to release a video of any of it. They said some of the perpetrators were minors. How'd they know that? They didn't know who they were. Well, it won't surprise you to learn that suppressing information about crime, not an effective way to fight it. In the past few weeks, there have been 2 more instances in which mobs have robbed and beaten up passengers on BART. Once again, no videos being released. This time, why? They're telling us why. BART has announced that videos are being held from the public because, we're quoting, to release these videos would create a high level of racially insensitive commentary, and in addition would create a racial bias in riders against minorities on trains, close quote. In other words, the public is too racist to be told what actually happened. BART administrators would rather endanger passengers than risk being called insensitive. For real. Do you recognize that attitude? It's everywhere. It's the same impulse that leads the Swedish government to hide official crime statistics from the public, or Angela Merkel to throw open the German borders to people who hate Germany and then publish anyone who complains about it. Across the world, our leaders show they care far more about appearing virtuous than about the well-being of their own people. They'd rather you were attacked on the subway than be accused of bigotry themselves. They don't care about you. At least people who run the BART out in San Francisco admit they don't care about you. Well, speaking of California, a place that is now on the brink of becoming the country's first sanctuary state, the Senate bill there, 54, the number is, cleared a major hurdle to passage last week and now just awaits approval from a single committee in California's heavily Democratic Assembly. In other words, it's likely to pass. If it is, that bill would bar federal agents, ICE agents, from all state jails and would block federal agents from accessing state databases related to immigration. It's a big deal. Sandra Hutchins is sheriff of Orange County in California. She says the state's effort to become a sanctuary state is not good policy. It's about sticking it to the administration. Sheriff Hutchins joins us tonight. So, Sheriff, give us the parameters of this. This would basically put California as a state in active opposition to federal immigration law. Is that an overstatement?
I don't think that's an overstatement. You know, we've been cooperating with ICE and with the federal government for many, many, many years, very cooperatively, very effectively. And we're talking about serious crimes, serious criminals who have committed a crime. They've been tried here, they've done their time, and we've been notifying ICE of these individuals so that they can go through deportation proceedings. Senate Bill 54, Senator De Leon said this is the only thing he can think of to do to stop the quote-unquote Trump deportation machine. And that is clearly not an issue. That is not an issue. This is a totally political issue, and it does not take into account the public safety of Californians, which I deeply care about, and that is the real issue. There's no need for this bill. Things have been working fine without it. The author has stated that this will prevent local law enforcement from doing immigration enforcement on the streets. We never have done immigration enforcement on the streets. We have no desire to do that. And we've not been asked to do that by the Trump administration. So this bill would prohibit me as a sheriff from notifying ICE of someone who's in custody for potentially felony, driving under the influence, domestic violence, human trafficking, rape of an unconscious person. I would not be able to notify them. They would be released to the street. And then what will happen is ICE will go out. They're not going to let these people go. They're going to go out and they're going to do search warrants on homes. And then people who are here illegally or undocumented and have not committed crimes, they're going to get scooped up too. So this bill does not do what it says it does. It places additional residents at risk, law enforcement, perhaps people who are here.
So, more or less, you're saying this bill is
documented but have not committed crimes. So ICE is still trying to focus on those, the priority enforcement, those individuals who have repeatedly committed offenses, re-entered the country, have criminal records, and the fact that we can't notify them and have to release them to the street is not acceptable to me.
So, I mean, it's not like illegal aliens in California are having a tough time anyway. California has more illegals than any state by far. And a huge percentage of your population is there illegally. So what was the need that gave rise to this bill, or is it purely a symbolic act aimed at the administration?
It's a symbolic act aimed at the administration, in my opinion, but more importantly, it places Californians at risk of being impacted by these criminals who are getting released to the street.
So if the state of California can say to the feds, we're just ignoring your law, then why can't Orange County say to the state of California, we're ignoring your law? I mean, would you abide by these terms, or would you notify the feds if you apprehended an illegal?
We've already asked the question. We've asked legal counsel. Cal State Sheriffs, which I'm a member, has asked legal counsel, and we would be subject to being prosecuted if we didn't follow the state law. But it puts us in you make a great point. It puts us in a terrible position of violating federal law, not cooperating with federal authorities. And we work on task forces with ICE. We work on a sexual exploitation task force. This bill would require us to report everything we do to the Attorney General of the state of California. These are very great cooperative task forces that deal with a lot of crime, our registered sex offenders. A lot of those are undocumented aliens. This would really impact our ability to fight crime in our communities.
So California is cool with ignoring federal law, but ignore their laws, and you're in trouble. Good luck, Sheriff Hutchins. We'll welcome you in the East Coast anytime you want to come. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Coming up, it's the Russia collusion story nobody else is talking about for some reason. We're going to talk to a reporter about the anti-fracking activists who apparently received help from the Russian government. Americans colluding with Russia in the environmental movement. Great story. Stay tuned. Tonight, Russia may actually have intervened in American politics, but not in the way you have heard about. This is an amazing story. In a newly released letter to the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, Republican Congressman Lamar Smith and Randy Weber say that Russia is working with American environmental groups to spread misinformation about hydraulic fracking, it's called. The goal, get it banned, fracking banned in the U.S., which of course would hurt the U.S. energy sector and benefit the Russian energy sector. It's all about the price of gas. Kevin Mooney is an investigative reporter with the Daily Signal, and he joins us now with details. Kevin, the story's almost too good. It's almost like you almost couldn't make this up. Actually, they did intervene, but on behalf of Greenpeace. Is that an overstatement? How did this happen?
Well, let's give Russia credit. They know how to look out for their own interests. But the problem is they're using our own environmental movement to advance their interests. And here's the really big bombshell. And let's thank Representative Lamar Smith and his colleagues with oversight of our energy who dug into this and connected the dots. Russia is using a shell company in Bermuda to funnel company through, which then goes to a group called the Sea Change Foundation, which then disperses tens of millions of dollars to our own environmental organizations in the U.S., which in turn carry the water for Vladimir Putin to slam and smear the innovative practice of fracking, which has enabled this shale gas revolution. Which, as you know, has really greatly bolstered America's...
And undercut Russia's position in the energy markets.
Right.
Our official position on this show is we are skeptical of all Russia stories until we see the proof. So the allegation is that the Russian government has funneled money pretty directly to American environmental groups. How do we know that's true?
Well, we know it from our own intelligence community. If you go to the dailysignal.com, which is our news site at the Heritage Foundation, they lay this out with a letter from Lamar Smith. They've done this for years. In fact, I'll even cite Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State, cited phony environmental groups that were being funded by the Russians. She described herself as an environmentalist and expressed frustration that the Russians were propping up these environmental organizations to advance their own interests. This is really about protecting Gazprom, Russia's largest oil company, because if the United States fracking revolution and the shale gas revolution accelerates, it puts Gazprom and Russia back on their heels.
Well, their entire economy is built on. At least this story has an explicable, logical motive. The idea that Trump got the support of Putin because they're both fascists and they like each other. I mean, it's not a compelling motive. This is a clear motive that makes economic sense, and so it's easier to buy. Is it legal? If this is true, if we learn that U.S. environmental groups took money from the Russian government, is that against the law?
Well, that's why Lamar Smith and other congressmen are calling for the U.S. Treasury Department to conduct an investigation into this. Let's at least look at the financing. If you're going to ask all these questions about how much Russia's influencing elections or how much influence they have on Donald Trump, then it logically follows we should look at something that has a tangible connection. It would make sense for Russia to try to stop fracking exercises in the United States, because if we succeed, we can liberate Poland and most of Europe from their economic dependence on Russia.
Well, that's the key. So finally, we know that there's an awful lot of anti-energy, anti-natural gas, anti-fracking propaganda on Russian state television in the U.S. RT, which is otherwise a very left-wing channel. It's not like a pro-Trump channel, that's for sure. Are we certain that that is intentional, that the Russian government wants RT to spread anti-fracking propaganda to hike the price of U.S. natural gas?
I'm not sure it's intentional. I think some folks are just being duped. I think it's a combination of the two. You have certain levels of the environmental movement that may be compliant in this or complicit on a certain level. And you have rank-and-file, sincere environmentalists who I think are just being duped and manipulated, which Russia is very adept at doing.
So I guess what we're looking at here is the wholesale hacking of our environmental establishment.
Yeah, I mean, the modern environmental movement has nothing to do with environmentalism as it's defined.
I've absolutely noticed that. It seems like an outrage to me. Kevin Mooney, thank you for that. That was fascinating.
Thanks so much.
An open letter to an Antifa website is calling for worldwide action against fascists using violence. We've got the letter. We'll show it to you next. Well, an open letter published on a self-described anti-fascist website is calling for violence against the supporters of Donald Trump. Consider the irony there. The anonymous letter is published on an anarchist site called It's Going Down, probably on your favorites list. It calls for the world's moderates and liberals to abandon existing government institutions to create a militant anti-Trump resistance willing to use force. Ian Miles Chung is a freelance journalist who follows the anti-fascist movement, so-called, and he joins us tonight. Ian, thanks a lot for coming on. So, how real is this?
100% real. You know, we've seen this with at the demonstrations against Milo Yiannopoulos at UC Berkeley, and we've seen it more recently in Evergreen. We've seen it at Seattle. We've seen it in a variety of places across the United States. You know, Baltimore, Mississippi, everywhere, where Antifa or cells thereof are blooming. You know, they're sprouting, blooming like plants. You know, so it's very much real. You know, and not enough people, I think, are paying attention to it, unfortunately.
So are these protests, these demonstrations, in a lot of cases, these riots, organized, I mean, this gets posed a dumb question, but on sites like this?
Absolutely. I mean, this site is what I would call a highly trafficked platform for recruiting, radicalizing, and mobilizing extremists. This is one of the main sites to do it. Like, they will, you know, do something in private, and then they'll brag about it on It's Going Down, and that encourages other cells to do the same, because they kind of get cred from doing it, you know?
So what, I mean, maybe I'm looking at this through an old-fashioned lens, but what's the ideology of this group? What do they believe?
They're anarchists, you know. They call themselves anti-fascists, which gives you the impression that they were, you know, and it'll tell you that they were founded in like 1930s or something to fight the Nazis. But in reality, they were founded in like the 80s. I mean, at least the modern version of them, or the modern incarnation, was founded in the 80s in Europe, and they're essentially just communist or anarchist groups who don't like capitalism, and they want to overthrow it. And that's all they believe in. It's violent. Some of them, they publish independent manifestos, and all it talks about is we don't believe in anything, and we just want to see the system burn itself down. So, yeah.
They don't seem very bright. I mean, if you hated capitalism, you'd be every bit as mad at Hillary, but they're not. Kind of weird. Ian, thanks a lot for this. Good luck. Be careful. We'll be right back.